Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tucker and Crowley Report. I'm joined by Franklin Tucker, longtime editor of the Belmontonian, which you can find at belmontonian.com, and I'm Mike Crowley. So let's talk about the news this week, Franklin. What have we got?
Well, we got the big news, I guess you can call it big news, is that the rink, the municipal skating rink building committee announced that of their $30 million project to build a new rink, they are $4.3 million short. So that was a big surprise because many people, members of the committee, that was the first time they heard how deep that is. And this is not if it was like $4.3 million on the high school, which is 2.95, then that's kind of a addition error. But this is something that is could very well put this project in jeopardy.
So the last time that we talked about the rink, Franklin, which I think was just last week, there was an effort to go back and look at what kind. It's called value engineering, where you go back and you take a look at things that perhaps you don't need to do, which could lower the cost. What's come from that process?
Well, first off, they have been going through a value engineering process for the last month and a half.
Okay,
and it was basically a lot of talking about value engineering. Then the numbers became clear. They were announced on Wednesday at a meeting, at a 7:30 meeting. It was pretty much a shock to everybody. For many people, it was something that they weren't prepared for, but they knew something was up. I mean, because how we got here, how we got at the $4.3 million is something that's happening with construction all across the country. It's just an acceleration of costs. Anything from concrete going, up $500,000 and plumbing and everything you can think of. Just an explosion of cost inflation from a year ago when the debt exclusion was passed by voters to build the rink.
Well, so let me ask you what happens, Franklin. I mean, is there still a value engineering process to go through to try to whittle that figure down, or have they settled on a figure that they have to come back to the town and ask for?
Well, they're going to be coming back to the town. I mean, we know that's going to be happening unless Skanska, who is the contractor, and the committee can find and agree to compromise on what cuts they can make. But even after they were making some major cuts, like possibly getting rid of locker rooms or essentially taking out the face of the building, the lobby, it still wasn't enough to do that. So a day before the meeting where this was announced, the building committee, the contractor, and the architect went to the town. They went and had a meeting with Roy Epstein, the head of the select board, Patrice Garvin, who will be a very important person in this process, and she's the town administrator, and Mike Whitmer, because if there is a request for money, it's going to come before town meeting.
Sure.
And not much was said, publicly, and it's been and they've been very quiet. Those parties, what was said, but one thing that did come out was that Roy Epstein said to the building committee, "You're not going to get more than $2 million. If you come with a request for over $2 million, I'm not going to submit it to town meeting because it will be the select board who makes the article, who will report the article to town meeting, and that would occur in the first couple of days of segment B, which will be the end of May."
Okay.
So we're pretty much now at the value engineering, super fast value engineering, where they're just cutting. They're cutting pieces of the building apart, and the reason. And now they have they've given themselves only a 4 business days to do that value engineering.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be coming back on May 3rd. I believe it is May 2nd, I should say, May 2nd, to discuss a a revised budget and what they will then do. But it's almost a certainty that they will be coming to town meeting. How town meeting is going to respond to this is anybody's idea, because they can say, look, we got into this situation, and this is what the committee has said. We have to go to the town. Before town meeting, we have to say, this is what happened, and this is what we're doing. And a lot of that has to do with, like you say, like what they're doing now. Do as much value engineering as possible. Bring down that $4.3 million shortfall to an acceptable rate, and then they can go to the town and say, look, but there's also that, you can't cut that building any further than it is. I mean, it's pretty standard.
They had already made some cuts to bring the project down to an acceptable
Well,
level
they thought it was
previously,
going to be $30 million, right? And but as many members said, look, we can't go back to the town and say, oh, this is we're not going to give them a gray box, because we're not going to give them a dull gray box, because that's what we could, because this building was sold to people, to supporters, to people who wanted a community center, as this really nice looking 12 months of the year project, and that meant also, they promised the schools even, we are going to give you 4 dressing rooms, locker rooms, because we took down the white field house. Right. So they have to at least have something. And there are some people in the community who say, look, let's just go to town and say we're $4.3 million in deficit, and it's nobody's fault but just the conditions that we're in. But how will town meeting take that? And also, these town meeting members are also residents who went to the ballot box just a month ago to pass a large override.
So I do want to ask you, Franklin. So the rink project has got some big hurdles before we're going to have a rink. But given that the nature of the problems are the kinds of things that you would see with any building project, largely, it sounds like, what does this say about the prospects for the library building project?
Well, what we've heard so far about the library is that it's going smoothly. They're not going through they are going to have to go through value engineering. We know that. Mm-hmm. But so far there hasn't been any, when you attend those meetings, it seems like they have a little bit better idea of what their costs are, and how and where they could be seeing some escalation in cost. So they're in a little better shape.
All right.
Well, I shouldn't say a little better shape. They're in better shape.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the next story. So we've lost a former superintendent of the Belmont Public Schools. What can you tell us, Franklin?
Peter Holland was one of the most formidable educators that Belmont's ever had. He came in crisis. The previous superintendent was basically forced out because of fiscal mismanagement, and he came in and just revived Belmont education. First thing he did was we're talking about cutting costs. Mm-hmm. He cut $100,000 out of the central office budget and revamped the entire central office, and that led him to then go where he was best at, and that was showing leadership. Mm-hmm. In terms of really changing the approach that Belmont was taking towards education. He said in a podcast that in a blogcast that he did with Paul Roberts in 2008 when he retired, when he left the system. He spent 20 years here. Mm-hmm. He said, it was a good system, but he said, I really wanted it to really improve, and that was the thing that he did. He did things such as when he went to the middle school. Unfortunately, at the time, the middle school was known as a place where you put the older teachers who were just ready to retire. He put all young people, and he put them in team settings, and mm-hmm. and he had real high hopes for everybody that he hired, and he was involved in every hire. he made sure, he signed off. He was at interviews. He got to know the teachers. It was a real sea change from an old-fashioned system to a really progressive, a well thought out, plan of how we're going to really improve the school system. And he then he talked about how Belmont went from 5 AP courses to 26,
Mm-hmm.
how 50 students in the high school in one class had had one of two perfect 800 scores. Just a whole litany of things that he did, and it really proved itself. There's always that do you really take these national scores, like the U.S. News and World Report Best High Schools
Mm-hmm.
survey. But he liked to see that. He would point to like, oh, look where we are this year. And by the year after he left, Belmont was the 100th best high school in the country, and that meant also that was also comparing schools such as charter schools and advanced schools.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Belmont was truly one of the best schools, and we still have that. In the latest U.S. News World Report, we're in the 300s. Out of 2,400,
But
24,000 schools.
16th best high school in Massachusetts.
That's right. Falling, but
So-
no, please. If you're in the if you're the 16th best high school in the state that has the best high schools, you're doing pretty well.
All right.
But again, he was just a wonderful guy. He was very, he showed his leadership in 1 year. And I think it was 2000. I think it was 1995 when in January we had a teacher strike, and he really handled that very well. No animosities. Just let's see what we can do. And it was a very short strike. He got and once that strike was done, he went right back to the teachers and said, look, let's think about where we're going to go. We're going to teach these kids. And then later on that year in August, there was a fire at the middle school, and even though it just affected one part of the middle school, the town decided through Peter Holland's insistence to build a new middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was he really changed what Belmont Belmont in education, which brought so many young people to Belmont. And he'll be missed. I mean, he was just really, if you ever met him, he was just a wonderful guy. And, he was here just last year, giving a great donation to the high school library.
All right. Well, he'll be missed, and it's a sad loss.
Yes.
All right. So Franklin, let's talk about the MBTA Communities Advisory Committee wrapped up its business, which was transferred to the Planning Board. So what's happening now with?
Well, it's going to the Planning Board so they can create the changes in zoning to accomplish the recommendations. But there's always a but. It appears the Planning Board is going to seek advice and also some other maybe different ways of looking at the maps, because there's a map that we have to follow.
Is this to suggest that there will be other alternatives?
There might be alternatives. I think what you're seeing is this has been a complaint in Belmont, and there's been complaints across the state,
Mm-hmm.
and especially in Milton and Marshfield, which Marshfield just last week struck down their town meeting, struck down their MBTA communities plan. I think the complaints were, this is a heavily residential, and that's what it's supposed to be. Well, there are people in Belmont who are saying that's going to hurt our wish to make a larger commercial base, and we don't want to have a zoning. We don't have zoning that excludes commercial. We want these to be at least open to commercial. And again, this is almost theoretical. This is really theoretical. As a consultant for the school committee said the week before, unless they're pushing dirt, just don't even think about the MBTA Communities Act. It's really just a hope and dream, and that's what it is. It's theoretically we would like to put 1,600 new residential units. It's just making the zoning available to build that, and I think we'll see changes, and is this changes at the last minute, and do they pass muster with the state? So it's all up in the air.
So does this raise a question then about whether there is any plan going to town meeting in the fall?
Oh, I think so. I think
Okay.
there's no appetite to try to defy the state. Especially when we hear about the case of Milton and we hear about the case of Marshfield, but over 40 communities have already approved the MBTA, including Lexington and
Mhm.
Arlington. So our fellow communities are going forward with them, and there isn't any good reason not to do it, except that I think there's litigation that is now before the courts, and they believe that they'll have some sort of resolution in November, the same time when we'll have to vote for this. So there's a lot of balls in the air on this.
All right, so we will see what happens, but right now the ball is in the planning board's court.
Mhm.
Let's talk about seventh grade algebra.
Yeah,
What are
we
the-
talked about it.
and the prospects, have they changed?
Yes, they have. I think just by being well, first off, the school committee has not approved their budget. That's going to happen on May 7th. What they did this week or last week was just discuss it. See, what pathway do they want to go to? And I think it was pretty clear that when they looked at the budget, they said, we don't have an appetite to try to, after this override, we don't want to be coming in going, here's the money, let's start throwing money everywhere. They're saying we're going to take this very seriously. And one of the things that they were thinking about is, we have so many needs. Let's see what we really need to do. And there are what they call the budget needs, budget concerns that they have to go forward with. These are almost requirements, and certainly sped costs are going to be an issue. So seventh grade. So a week. So earlier, the school committee asked the superintendent to put a budget line item for seventh grade algebra, which is an enhanced course. It's something that it's an accelerated course. So it's only going to be used by a handful of students, let's say 20. And I think that's what a lot of them have said. Now, what the school committee, what I shouldn't say the school committee, the administration did was place the seventh grade algebra into a category called budget adjustments to consider, not to approve, but to consider. It's along with an extra assistant elementary principal, wellness coordinator, curriculum changes. But
it's on the table, but essentially, unless the budget situation were to magically improve, everything placed in that category is basically off of the table until next year or the year following or the year following.
That's true, and that's what you heard. It wasn't as if they were saying we're going to cut it. That's going to happen on the 7th if it does.
Yeah.
It's just that when they were talking, they had other considerations. As much, what are you going to pay for? How are you going to pay for it? Is it going to come from adjustments in the budget during the year, such as when teachers leave? We don't know what and how you save money by having a lower salary from what the previous person in that position had. Or, but I think there's a real concern, and they really, the school committee wants to have a lot of reserves, just money in reserve, because there's always a budget concern somewhere in the year. So they want to have some money, and it looks like, those 4 things that budget adjustments to consider, like the wellness coordinator and the assistant principal, along with 7th grade algebra. Like you said, it's just going to be, sorry, we just don't have the money.
Okay, Franklin, let's move on then and talk about town meeting, which is coming up Monday.
Well, as one person said to me, it shouldn't be called segment A, which we call the non-budgetary part of the town meeting. It should be called Budget Z.
Segment Z?
Segment Z, and you know what? That's because it's going to be a snoozer.
A snoozer.
There's nothing controversial. There's nothing that's bringing people into the streets or writing letters to the editor. I think what you're going to see is a lot of house cleaning and things like that. There is a budget. They're going to try to amend a budget a bylaw for restaurant parking, and that's. I mean, do we have? I mean, we should have more restaurants, and
So probably necessary, but not exciting.
no, that's right. It's part of your duty to be down. It's part of your duty to come down into the auditorium at the high school to vote on these, because they're important. Yeah, they're part of your legislative duties.
Okay, Franklin, we'll see what happens with town meeting, and we will report back on that. In the meantime, again, you can find more of Franklin's reporting at belmontonian.com, and you can look for us next week. I'm Mike Crowley. We'll see you next time.